And we're back with Warren Kinsella. Warren, I know that you think of yourself as an Irish bar fight, but before we go further, I don't want to take the phrase out of context. So tell me what it is that you do think of yourself as, and why. Before I discuss Irish bookmakers and the U.S. presidential election.
Well, I mean, I didn't like, so some people call me the Prince of Darkness. And it wasn't me who came up with that. It was Kim Campbell. In back in the beginning of time in 1993, a Tory buddy of mine, I was a committee to torment conservatives when I was working for Chrétien. And this Tory I was friends with slid into the seat beside me and he said, "You know what they're calling you?" And I said, "No." And he said, "They're calling you the Prince of Darkness." And I laughed. And he said, "That's what Kim Campbell's calling you too," because she had just become conservative leader. So I didn't make that up. And then this walking Irish bar fight, which is kind of in the same theme, was I first heard from my buddies Cal Bricker and John Wright, one smart political guy and one smart poll guy, saying you're the walking Irish bar fight. So that's stuck as well. I think I'm a nice person. Like, don't you think I'm a nice person?
I think that you're a nice person, but it's situational. I have experienced
one smart political guy and one smart poll guy saying you're the walking Irish bar fight. So that's stuck as well. I think I'm a nice person. Like, don't you think I'm a nice person?
I think that you're a nice person, but it's situational. I have experienced the bar fight, both on the podcast and in person. And I've experienced, look, you know, the greatest compliment I ever received was in the first 6 months of my launch of talk radio in Calgary. So this would have been 1990, a long time ago. And a guy called Jim was driving his rig, as many people were all over the country. And, you know, I was riding shotgun with them. I was their companion. And Jim, somewhere in Alberta, called in to say that he'd been listening for the last few months and that I had more gears than a Kenworth. And my producer was an Albertan and I was an Alberta expat. Sounded good to me. So the fact that you're not predictable, that nothing about you is predictable, to me is a good thing. And no matter how seriously some people want to take what we do here, this is an entertainment platform. And in entertainment, the number one sin is predictability. And I would say it's also the same in politics, Warren. I think people who are entirely predictable in politics don't have personality. And if you don't have personality, you know, go do, with all due respect to all those people with no personalities, go do something else. If you're in politics, whether you're commenting or you're an active politician or frankly even a wholesale politician, no personality, no mas. But the reason I ask about the Irish bar fight is you mentioned Bricker and Wright, and I respect these guys. I respect Abacus. That would be David Coletto. I respect all of them. I know all of them. However, the record shows that when it comes to U.S. elections, the people who do the best at predicting are the Irish bookmakers. Now, you being an old warrior, can tell me why that is before I let you know what the Irish bookies are saying about the Trump Biden contest.
Because we play those games quite a bit. I still buy lottery tickets. My dad, you know, a member of the Order of Canada, a scientist, every week he'd buy the 649 in Calgary and he'd come home and my brothers and I would make fun of him and he said, "See, you've wrecked it for another week. I have to buy them next week." And he did that until he died. So now I do it using the birthdays of all my kids and my parents, you know, the little numbers. Yeah. And like I remember my grandmother, Charles, Mary Kinsella, grade 4 education, cleaned people's toilets. And she would do the sweepstakes, you know, in Montreal.
The Irish sweepstakes.
Yeah, the Irish sweepstakes, because it was illegal to do lotteries in those days before the federal government realized what a mistake they were making. And she did the sweepstakes. The sweepstakes is one of my earliest memories. So yeah, we know a bit about gambling and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, my dad, who was nominally against gambling, was convinced the odd time by his customers to play the ponies, as in the Irish sweepstakes. And just so everyone is clear, it was legal to buy Irish sweepstakes tickets and play the ponies in Ireland, but there was no legal lottery in Canada. And then, as you say, they realized the mistake. As a matter of fact, correct me if I'm wrong,
There's Joe
but I think
Clark,
Quebec,
was it?
I think
Yeah,
Quebec
Quebec.
was the
Yeah,
first, and
yeah.
and in Quebec. So, some of my friends, it won't surprise you, Warren. You've lived everywhere, and in Western Canada, especially in Alberta, there is this very bizarre view of what Quebec is like. It has absolutely nothing to do with what Quebec is like. We can get into that, but in Quebec, it wasn't called a lottery at first. I don't know if you remember, but the provincial premier or the mayor of Montreal, I'm not sure which, but anyway, but
It's
one of the
Drapeau.
Quebec politicians,
Yeah.
it could have been Drapeau, but one of the Quebec politicians decided that the only way that, or their lawyers explained that the only way this could be legal is if it wasn't called a lottery. Okay, because lotteries were illegal, so they called it. I think they called it a lottery tax. Do you remember that?
That sounds uniquely Quebec.
In Quebec, they called it a lottery tax, and that taxes are definitely legal in
Well, it's a
Quebec.
tax. It's a tax on daydreams, as they say. But
Yes.
yeah, I in the States, to get you and I are being our typical selves and meandering all over the place. But Biden ain't dead yet, folks.
Okay.
He ain't dead yet. And what is it? I can never pronounce the poll. What is Quinnipiac? How do you?
Quinnipiac.
Yeah, they've got Biden ahead. They've got Biden competitive, I think half a percentage point behind Trump. And I think, as you know, I was despairing of that outrageous report by the special counsel looking into the documents that were found in the home of Joe Biden, who I work for, full disclosure. In his garage. And so they brought in this special prosecutor who had worked for Trump and worked in the Trump White House. And it was just he didn't find that Biden had done anything wrong, but he said that Biden was this, forgetful old man who forgot when his son died, and so just terrible, cruel things. It kickstarted a lot of this stuff about age. And but then 3 days later, Trump says, "Oh, by the way, if you're not paying your NATO dues, you deserve to be attacked by Russia." And that kind of changed the channel. And I think it reminded people what the threat that Trump poses, which is chaos. And so anyway, I think Biden's back in the race. I don't think it's over by a long shot.
No, I'm not saying it is. I just it's taken me. I don't know how many minutes we've been on now, but I have a feeling it's double digits. We're probably into the 10th minute here. I just wanted to say what I wanted to say 10 minutes ago, that the Irish bookmakers still have Joe Biden losing, but Trump ahead of Joe Biden by double digits. That's what the Irish bookies have
Oh,
right now.
that's
So
what they're saying. Okay, well, I
yeah,
think they're wrong. It's just like, for sure, Trump is popular with Republicans.
yeah.
Republicans, he owns a big part of their base, not all of it. Nikki Haley's still in the race, and she said yesterday she's going to stay until the very end. She said, "I'm not going anywhere other than, Kentucky or wherever it is she's going
Well, she'll
next."
stay in. She'll stay in as long as the money
Yeah,
keeps coming in. If the money
and she's
dries up,
getting money. She's getting
she's getting
money.
at the moment. She's getting money. Yeah,
So, but it's
but
November's a long way away.
it's a long way away. But there's this other wrinkle, okay, and this other wrinkle is a guy who calls himself Bobby Kennedy. Now his name is Bob Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, Robert Kennedy Jr. He is the son of the real Bobby Kennedy, but
Yeah.
there's nobody. I have looked hither and yon, and I don't use those words casually. Okay, I've looked everywhere in the Kennedy family, and I know people who know people, and full disclosure, I also know some members of the Kennedy family, and not one of them. I mean, none of the biological connections to Robert F. Kennedy, none of the people who've married into the family. Nobody I know of in the Kennedy empire, which is vast, and that's why I had to do the hither and yon. None of them endorse Bobby Kennedy. I'm not going to repeat what they call him, but the point is the only connection between, let's call it a spiritual or political or philosophical, the only important connection between Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and his dad is that his dad sired him. There is absolutely no comparison between Junior and the rest of the family.
Yeah, and full disclosure, I'm doing a lot of full disclosures on this one. I worked with Bobby. I worked with the son that you described years ago on an anti-tobacco campaign, which you know is one of my passions. And he was a great guy and smart, and he had smart guys working with him, and we had fun. And we didn't win what we wanted to. We wanted to bring a class action. We wanted all the governments in Canada to bring a class action against the tobacco manufacturers, like they've done in the United States successfully. And Canada, of course, decided to do it in internally. And of course, we don't have any settlement yet with the tobacco companies. But Bobby, I got to know him quite well, and he's a great guy. And then some things happened in his personal life, and the cheese slipped off the cracker, in my opinion, in the opinion of many others, including his family. So, you got to look at the fundamentals for sure. He's got the name thing, having a name, as Justin Trudeau showed and as George W. Bush showed, and so on. Having the name of a successful father does not hurt in politics. It doesn't. Um, the problem is when you get beyond that superficial level with Bobby, you see that he's got much more in common with Donald Trump than he does with Joe Biden. His insane position on vaccines, his belief in conspiracy theories, including he believes in the conspiracy that Sirhan, the Palestinian who killed his father and went to prison for it, didn't actually do it. Conspiracy theories about his uncle, JFK. Like he shares much more in common with the Trump constituency than he does with Biden's. So I believe, and there is some data to show this, that ultimately, Bobby hurts Trump in the fullness of time and not Biden.
All right. So let me then go after demographics here. I know what your position on Israel is. I mean, you're clear. But here's the question: how much does Joe Biden's position on Israel, which is just very similar to Warren Kinsella's, very pro-Israel? This isn't about an endorsement of the Netanyahu government. It's just pro-Israel. Israel has the right to do whatever it takes to defend its sovereignty. Okay, and that particular position that Joe Biden is holding on Israel is said to be affecting him seriously and substantively with certain communities in the United States. It should surprise no one. It is a problem in the Muslim community, and the Muslim community is very significant in Michigan, which is a state that Joe Biden absolutely needs to win. It's one of the most important battlegrounds. Michigan matters, and he's in trouble in Michigan, whether it's the Irish bookmakers, Quinnipiac, any of them. He's in trouble in Michigan. He's also in trouble with the young demographic, which is very much part of the coalition. How do you square the circle, Warren Kinsella, on Joe Biden's position on Israel and some of the problems it causes with him at the ballot box?
Well, firstly, his position on Israel is the historic position of every single U.S. president since Israel was founded in 1948. So he's not doing anything different than anybody has done before. That's number one. Number two, as in the United States, it's now happening in Canada this week. The National Council of Muslims sent a letter to all members of parliament, but aimed at the government, saying to Trudeau and his government, you're not going to be allowed to go into our mosques, until you do this, this, and this about Israel. And, I don't think that benefits the conservatives. I don't think it actually hurts anybody. I think it's a wash. Basically, the political Muslim community has removed itself from politics, and they've made that decision. It's sad they've decided to do that, but it doesn't hurt anybody. And again, so I look at this constituency for sure. Michigan has got one of the highest percentage of Muslim Americans in the United States. And, you see that in their representation. But where are they going to go, Charles? Are they going to vote for the guy who said he wants to bar every single one of them from being in the United States? Do they want to work with the guy who said a few days ago that he wants to kick them out of the United States, even if they're there illegally? Like, where are they going to go? So, again, I don't think a lot of the Muslim leadership is being very strategic about the decisions they're making. By absenting themselves from the political process, they are hurting themselves. And the same thing applies to the Jewish community, by the way. I've said to this, my Jewish friends and Jewish leadership for years, for sure. I know lots of you support the Conservative Party. I get that. But some of you need to be supporting the Liberal Party. Some of you need to be supporting the New Democrats. Some of you need to be involved in the Green Party. Like, it moves around. Parties get defeated, right? You've got to have an ability to speak to people who are in government to protect your interests. That's what I say to every client. So, like, and not that I have any Jewish or Muslim clients at the moment at all, but that's, you got to participate in the process. So by removing yourself from Biden, to get back to your question, I don't think they're hurting him really, because they're not going to go to Trump.
What about youth? Would you say the same thing, that
No.
Joe Biden is the guy who's trying to get young people virtually free university, at least at state schools? Not trying to get them free university. He's trying to reimburse young people and people who aren't so young anymore, but he's trying to reimburse those people who have outstanding debt on student loans, and that's a significant chunk.
No, I would not. No, and so you zeroed in on the not the vulnerability in my argument, but Joe Biden's vulnerability. Joe Biden lost, as you and I have talked about many times before, because of 70,000 odd votes in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin, and it was Michigan, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was Hillary Clinton who lost.
Hillary, sorry.
Yeah.
So, it takes very little in the ridiculous electoral college system to lose. And so Hillary, who I also worked for, another full disclosure, we lost basically because of 70,000 votes. When you drill down to find out who those 70,000 people were, they weren't Muslims, they weren't African Americans, they were young people, they were millennials. And, we tried, those of us who were supporting Hillary, try to figure out, well, what turned them off? What turned them off very successfully was Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders ran a very aggressive campaign in 2016 against Hillary, saying that she was a corporate toady and owned by the hedge funds and so on, all that stuff that the younger demographic hate. And it just indelibly marked her with a lot of that constituency. And we think that's the main reason she lost. Also, the sexism that's inherent in American politics.
Well, there's one other thing I should add. She also lost because she voted with Bush and virtually everyone else in the Republican caucus. Obama didn't vote that way, but Hillary was with the majority of senators who voted for participating in the war in Iraq. And during the election campaign, she tried to walk that back, but that was impossible, especially with the Bernie Sanders crowd. As far as they were concerned, Hillary Clinton was a Republican hawk.
Yeah, for sure. It hurt her with that demographic, but she was by no means alone in taking that position. Obama didn't have that position. It probably helped him with young people in 2008, but everybody, with the exception of Jean Chrétien and Barack Obama, was in favor of going after weapons of mass destruction, including, here's another full disclosure, me. Right? And just the war story, I think I've told you before, Chrétien phoned me up and said, what should we do? I said, boss, I'm worried the Americans will punish us. I think we got to go.
Yeah.
And he hung up, and, next thing I know, he's standing up in the House of Commons saying, we're not going to go.
Well, my initial inclination was to also support that war. And the only person who actually did make me second guess my position and make me really seriously think about it was Jean Chrétien, your old boss. I thought that he might, in the political short term, pay a price as far as Americans punishing them. But my gut told me that if Jean Chrétien smelled that something wasn't kosher here, to mix a whole bunch of metaphors, then he may have a case, because I just thought Chrétien's instincts, while I wasn't politically a big supporter of Jean Chrétien, I did think that on the big picture he had very, very good instincts, and as it turns out, he did. And as it turns out, Jean Chrétien is responsible. I know he doesn't get enough credit for this in history, but Jean Chrétien is responsible for saving not hundreds, but likely thousands of Canadian lives, because I have no doubt that if Canada had participated in that war, they would have been chopped up like cannon fodder, just as the Americans and others were. And I also have no doubt that the Canadians would have ended up recruiting a number of people who would have done just the same thing that Americans did. Young people going to that war because of patriotism and all the other reasons that young people are sometimes seduced into joining the military. I'll tell you this, we are meandering a bit, but the one of the toughest days of my life, Warren Kinsella, was going to come home in a casket or a wheelchair, and it tore the. I don't use this word very often. It tore the shit out of me. It was very, very difficult, and it's one of the most difficult things when you're doing politics, whether you're in retail politics or you're doing political commentary, to take a particular position and then see what the consequences of that position are on real human beings. And seeing these young Marines and knowing what I knew at that point, that anyway, let's move on from there. Suffice it to say that we are many months away. February to November is a long time in politics. Do you think at this point, because I'll ask on behalf of all of the right-wing podcasters and others who are still saying that the Democrats will find a way to replace Joe Biden, do you think at this point, we're talking about close to the end of February, is there any chance that Joe Biden will be convinced to make an LBJ-like speech? LBJ did it in March. That's when he said that he chose not to seek the nomination of his party. He was the president, just as Joe Biden is, but he felt that he couldn't possibly win against Richard Nixon, and he decided to leave. And there was another candidate in the wings whose name is, and this brings us back to what we were talking about earlier, his name was Robert F. Kennedy, not Jr., but Robert F. Kennedy Sr., and he would have won the nomination of the Democratic Party had he not been assassinated, despite what RFK Jr. says, had he not been assassinated by Sirhan Sirhan. The question is there a chance that in the next couple of weeks, Joe Biden will step away?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, politics, a week is a long lifetime in politics, per the cliche. And the reason why, I was upset by the ageism in the special counsel's report, because I work for a guy and they used to say, here, let me just turn that off. Hold on a second. I used to work for a guy who, people said was too old all the time. And I guess he kind of proved them wrong. So I had the same affection for Biden. And I think ageism is as bad as sexism or racism. But after the report came out and it hit the Democratic Party like a bomb, because it said in public what a lot of people have been saying privately about his age and his capacity. I get fundraising emails from the Democratic Party every single day because I've worked for them. But as a foreign national, I'm not allowed to donate to them. But I always find it interesting to see where they're going next, because they usually are ahead of the puck. They're like Wayne Gretzky. And the emails I got were from Jill Biden, not Joe Biden, about her husband. That's the first time I can recall that ever happening. That told me they were worried. They were concerned, because all of us had the same thought, which is this decision, the person who's going to be most influential on this is the person who loves him the most and, tucks him in the bed every single night, which is his wife, who's a physician. So I think, yes, there is a possibility that he makes that decision if he decides that his incumbency returns Donald Trump to the presidency, yes, I think he'll do that. He's that selfless a man. However, the problem with the strategy is, under the 25th Amendment, like the person who becomes then president of the United States is Kamala Harris. Like it doesn't go to a leadership
But I'm not. But I'm
convention.
not talking about him stepping away from the presidency. I'm saying the LBJ move. LBJ never stepped away from the presidency. He simply said he would finish his term as president, but he would not be a nominee for the
Yeah.
next term, which is what I think Joe Biden could do. And in the last few minutes that we have left, let me throw a name out. It's a different woman. It's not Kamala Harris, and it's not about Jill Biden. And by the way, I don't think that as it's a nice human story, but people do not vote for someone out of sympathy. And if Jill Biden is out there defending her husband, she's looking, not saying that she wants to make it appear this way, but it looks like she's looking for a sympathy vote. Sympathy is not attractive in retail politics. It may be attractive in real life, but not in real politics. So the woman I'm thinking about, because I'm thinking about Michigan, is the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer. There is zero doubt in my mind that the Democrats lock in Michigan if Gretchen Whitmer is the candidate. And there's also no doubt in my mind that in a debate with Donald Trump, Whitmer would do well. Warren Kinsella, what do you say?
No, I disagree. And I think she'd be a disaster for Canada. She defied the Biden White House on, for lack of a better name, the Enbridge main trunk line that basically keeps alive the economy of Western Canada. And anyway, they eventually prevailed upon her to back off, but she was prepared to do all that it takes to shut down that pipeline, only a tiny bit of which goes through her state. So I think she would be a wrong choice. But even leaving aside all of that policy stuff, Charles, when I worked for Hillary in 2016, I saw it up close. The United States is a deeply sexist, along with a racist society in many respects. I don't think they're ready for a female president. Going back to Geraldine Ferraro, this has been discussed in US politics, and Democrats are always open to it, but Republicans and independents are not. And by the way, I note in passing, the Liberal Party of Canada has never had a female leader, and is the most successful political machine in Western democracy. So I think it's pretty tough to win with Gretchen Whitmer or any woman, again, in the kind of the sexist climate of American politics these days.
So you're saying a black man has a better chance, and this is easy for me to say because a black man called Barack Obama did win not just one but two terms. You're saying it's easier in the United States for a black man to get into the White House than a woman, any woman.
Look at 2016, right? And the candidate he favored and that I worked for, Hillary Clinton. She'd been Secretary of State. She'd been First Lady. She'd been a senator. But she had a resume that made Donald Trump look like what he is, which is a joke. And she still lost. And for sure, we talked earlier about millennials going sideways in three key swing states. But, part of it is also, I think, sexism. And every candidate that I've worked for, with the exception of Joe, in the past decade has been a woman, because I believe that's the only way we're going to change our politics is to have, an actual balance in our politics. But, it'd be interesting to see, for example, up here, what the Liberal Party of Canada does next time. Jolie, they talk about, Anand, they talk about, Freeland, they talk about. But, I think if Justin takes a walk in the snow next week, because it's 40 years ago next week that his dad left, I think the names that probably are going to be more competitive, even within the Liberal Party, will be Champagne and Carney and what's his name, Fraser from Nova Scotia, from Atlantic Canada.
Warren, we've got a dash here. I do not think that Justin Trudeau is taking a walk in the snow next week, but a week, I guess, is also an eternity.
We'll find out next week.
We'll find out. Warren Kinsella, thank you very much. As always, Warren Kinsella is somewhere in Ontario. I'm somewhere in Manitoba.